Anybody that's got a phone or an internet connection is now an authority, and everyone's got an opinion. Parents, unfortunately, more and more today want to be their kid's friend instead of their kid's parent, which is something my dad taught me that has carried with me throughout my whole life. And that is, if you start something, you finish something. Imagine being slapped in the face, made this big sound. And I looked at him and I thought, this guy is now going to kill me.
Chris Casamassa, how are you?
I am doing amazing, Steve. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited you're here. You know, we've known each other for just a few years, but the thing that I've really enjoyed getting to know about you is that outside of your very confident and calm persona, there's layers. Like, for argument's sake, not only are you a best-selling author, we're going to go into your books on bullying and your 3 bestsellers, you're Scorpion. I'm actually talking to Scorpion. So before we get into that, and if that's not enough of a character for people to be listening, you're one of, I would probably say in doing my homework, and I doubt if you would admit it, one of the most successful owners of a group, a name of martial arts studios within America. How did this all come about? I want to learn about your age, because I'm gonna give you a little spoiler alert. What was it, 10 years old? Yeah, 10 years old, you got your first black belt?
That is correct, yes.
I want to know all about that behind. I want to know about why martial arts was so important to you. And then I want to know about the transition from that into your anti-bullying campaign and into the entrepreneurial space. So let's start at the beginning. How did martial arts appear in your life?
Martial arts appeared in my life through my father, who is the founder and creator of our style and system of martial arts. Before we get into that, I just have to teach you a little bit of Italian. My last name is Casamassa. It's a good Italian name.
I've got to get it right. I've got to get it.
For as long as I've known you, you've always butchered my last name. So I'm calling you out.
And the last person I want to upset is Scorpion. So, all right. So I will make sure I get that right. But thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So listen, I started when I was 4 years old. My dad was my hero growing up, and he was always at the studio. And I learned at a young age, if you want to see Dad, you're going to go to the studio. So I started early, and I fell in love with it at an early age. But what I learned at that age is something my dad taught me that has carried with me throughout my whole life, and that is, if you start something, you finish something. And he told me when I was 4, if you start martial arts with me, that's cool, but you can't stop until you make it to black belt. And, 4 years old, you don't get that. You don't understand. You're like, okay, Dad, whatever. But it taught me about goal setting, perseverance, focus at a very young age. And you're right. I made it at 10 years old. And here's a fun fact. I failed my very first black belt test because my dad was my teacher. And I thought he was just going to pass me because he was my dad. And he did not. He failed me. So that taught me about going through adversity very well. And it took me a whole nother year. I tried to test when I was 9. And I made it when I was 10 years old finally. And by then I was hooked on it, and I fell in love with the martial arts and kind of been in it ever since.
Now, again, it didn't stop there. We've spoken about this before. I studied martial arts. I did Wushu Quan. I've got a black belt in two different traditions. But you're not just a black belt. You're a 10th degree black belt. That takes some focus to actually go from black belt to those constant degrees. I want to understand that at the age of 10, you were told, hey, if you want to hang around with me and if you start something, you've got to finish it. Was there ever that point where you got your black belt where you went, well, okay, I've done that. My dad said I had to see it through, I'll stop now. What was the transition in your mindset that went, well, okay, having a black belt, that's actually the beginning. It's not the end. What was that like as a young lad?
Well, from the time I was 10 to 17, listen, I was all in. There was no internet back then. There wasn't a whole lot of distractions as there are today. So, you were in karate or you're in football, soccer, or whatever the sport was. So I was just all in on that. The problem was I became 17. And of course, as every teenager will ever tell you, they know everything and your parents know nothing. Yep. And when I was 17, I had achieved a 3rd degree black belt at that point. And, I thought I knew it all. I thought I knew more than my dad, stupid teenager stuff. And so I actually took a year off. And when I did, what happened was the students that were behind me, they didn't take the time off and they got ahead of me. So I was used to being the number 1 guy, the number 1 kid. And I came back and all of a sudden I was number 4, number 5. and I took that year off, and it took me 3 years to catch up for the year off. And after that, I never took time off again. And I realized just how smart my dad was.
Hey, I'm sorry for interrupting this podcast. I know it's a brilliant one, but I wanted to talk to you about your room, your connections. Now, we know full well that great things come from great connections and great rooms. Now, if you're in a room full of people that will challenge you, inspire you, motivate you, and support you, then great. But if not, then maybe I have the solution for you. Head on over to stevedsims.com, look up Sims Distillery there, and join our community of creative disruptors, those that are only not there to help you and motivate and actually give you information, but to support and answer questions. We very much vet the room to make sure that we support each other's growth. We all want each other to grow. So if you want to be in the right room, head on over to stevedsims.com/Sims Distillery, and I'll see you inside my room. Enjoy the rest of the show. So you got that training. I want to ask you quite directly, and I know there's anti-bullying, and we're going to go into that. Were you a punchy little kid?
A punchy?
Yeah, did you like to kind of like flex? You've got all of these kind of, you can walk in, you know how to look after yourself. There's a point to this question, but were you the kind of kid that could throw his weight around if you wanted to?
No, and here's why. I was a very late bloomer. I was short and stocky until I was a senior in high school. When I entered high school, I was 5 feet 1 inch tall. I was one of the smallest kids at my school. I weighed 95 pounds. So I was the kid that other kids would try and pick on. Now, fortunately, I had martial arts training, and that confidence, that self-awareness kept me out of a lot of bad situations. But no, I had no weight to throw around because I was basically a 95-pound weakling, but I could still kick a 6-foot guy in the head. So I had that in my back pocket, as it were. And yes, definitely not a punchy guy, no.
But you had it in your back pocket. I remember I was quite the opposite. When I was at school, I was one of the biggest lads in my class, which meant that every little shit that wanted to earn their stripes would pick on me. And I would get bullied a lot because I was the big fella. And we learned from a very early age that the ones you were careful of was always the little guys. But you weren't being all the kind of like Napoleon complex. You weren't out there going, hey, I'm small, but I can kill you. You were saying, hey, it's here if I need it. But you went on to be and you're very vocal about this now. In fact, it's on your books, Bulletproof Life, Bulletproof Fitness, and Business Combat. You're very much against bullying. Did you see much early on, or why did that become such a driving force in your life?
That's a great question. There's a couple of reasons. One, listen, I told you I was little, so although I had some confidence and self-awareness, there were still people that did want to pick on me. When I was a freshman, I went out for the wrestling team because part of our style is judo, which is throwing and ground fighting, naturally works into wrestling. There was our heavyweight wrestler at the time, this guy named Brian, was the 225 pounds, 6'2", and he heard that I knew karate. And of course, word got out, and my dad had done some demonstrations, things like that. And he wanted me to show him some martial arts. Now, one of the things that you learn when you're properly taught martial arts, you don't really show off. Like, it's something for you, and you use it if you have to. You don't go show off with it. But he kept going on and on and on. I want to see some karate. I want to see some karate. And this is the whole wrestling team there. It's tryouts day one. So he holds up his hand by his face, and he goes, "Just kick my hand." And I'm like, "All right, fine, hold it up." Now I'm nervous, I'm scared. I'm like, I'm the little tiny guy, but I knew I could kick his hand. So I went to kick it. Unfortunately, his hand was too close to his face. And when I went to kick his hand, I missed his hand, and I hit him right in the face with a round kick. And it was inside the gym, and it made this sound, just slapped right, like imagine being slapped in the face. It made this big sound. Yeah. And I looked at him, and I thought, this guy is now going to kill me. And he just put his hand to his face. He looked at me and smiled, and he said, "Good kick." And then that was it. After that, he became like one of my best friends, and he ended up being like a little protector of mine. Nobody could mess with me because the heavyweight wrestler was on my side. But that was a happy accident. You know what I mean? So even I got kind of picked on in a sense. But in our company, in our studios, we've been around since 1965. We've seen tens of thousands of kids that come to us, and they're shy and introverted. They're getting picked on. And we were helping them. Like, we're changing their life, changing their world. We're impacting our community. But I wanted to do more. Right. So part of my mission and passion and purpose right now is to help 1 million kids go through our bully-proof certification course that we do. And it's one of the reasons why I wrote the books, and one of the reasons why I travel all around the country teaching these clinics and classes to anyone and everyone that I can.
A lot of people think that you go to a dojo, you go to a martial arts school to become tough. And what tends to happen is your confidence increases to such a level that you find that you actually fight and are involved in confrontations less because of the confidence that actually inspires you. I'm a perfect example of that. But how did that change with Hollywood? And we're going to go into your Hollywood career shortly, which has been all over the place. I'm going to throw out some of these names because no one's ever heard of these. Batman and Robin, Blade, Walker, Texas Rangers, dozens more, and of course, like the billion-dollar franchises, Scorpion under Mortal Kombat. But how did Hollywood and the TV impact people turning up and not turning up? Because obviously, with both of us being in the LA area, we've had a great franchise that made a comeback recently, Karate Kid.
Correct.
But of course, there's been so many times Kung Fu in these different things. And of course, can't ever talk about karate and martial arts without talking about Bruce Lee. How have these impacted or maybe even gone against what you teach?
Well, listen, it inspired a whole generation of kids. The biggest one, of course, besides Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris, was when the original Karate Kid movie came out. Now, Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, mid-'70s, big Enter the Dragon, Revenge of the Dragon, all those movies, they helped a lot of adults really want to take part in martial arts. But when the Karate Kid came out in the 80s, I think it was 84, 85, Karate Kid 1, 2, we had lines of people out the door waiting to sign up for karate. And so it was really a heyday of it. And it really inspired it. And recently, with the resurgence of Cobra Kai, we've had another surge and a next generation of kids wanting to do martial arts, which is great. Because listen, here, I'm going to give you my personal opinion. If everyone on the planet studied martial arts for just 1 year, I think our planet would be a much better place because of the respect and the discipline and focus that you learn when you're learning martial arts. It's part of what's going on with this crazy mixed up world that we live in is there's so many mixed up people. And I've seen it my whole life, how martial arts changes people's lives and impacts communities.
That's a growing theme that I've heard from a lot of different people. In fact, I had Sammy the Bull Gravano, who I obviously do not condone, but he was the hitman to John Gotti, and his entire conversation was on about discipline and respect. And here I am now talking to an incredibly successful CEO of Red Dragon Karate Studios, talking the same thing. Why are we losing respect in today's world?
Entitlement, man. It's and social media. Listen, with the rise of social media, anybody that's got a phone or an internet connection is now an authority, and everyone's got an opinion, right? So there's a lot of things happening now that haven't happened in the past, but we have to learn to adapt and adjust. I'm not saying, hey, let's do away with social media or do it. We just have to learn to adapt and learn to be better people. What's that old saying? If you don't have something nice to say, don't say it.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't have something nice to tweet, maybe don't tweet it. Maybe if you don't have something nice to text, maybe don't text it. And that's a general rule that I've learned my whole life, and it's served me well. So
you've been very successful at training other gyms, other dojos, other practices. I've actually been very, very fortunate to actually speak at one of those as well. Why was it so important for you to kind of like share what you were doing with your studios to other studios?
Again, another great question. The number one answer is there are so many martial arts school owners that are struggling. They're following their passion, but they're just not making ends meet. They have 2-3 jobs, right? And what we do when we teach martial arts is we change people's lives. There's no one yourself included. If I ask you, did martial arts change your life? Of course, the answer is going to be yes. Like you might end up being a street fighter, being in the gang, maybe. Who knows? But because you were in an art form that taught you a structure and a focus and a discipline, it changes the course of your life. And that's what people who teach martial arts do. They change people's lives. But there's so many that don't understand the business side. My dad included. When he started Red Dragon in 1965, he loved martial arts. Right? He learned in Japan when he was in the military. He came back, but he didn't know what he was doing with business. We made every mistake possible. But after a half a century, you figure some shit out. And so we've made every mistake so other martial arts schools don't have to. So our systems, our business platform, the way that we do things has survived for over half a century because we've made all those mistakes. So I can help fast track another martial art business owner's success by just implementing our systems. And the cool thing is, it doesn't matter what style of martial arts you do. Like ours is a mixed martial arts style, but if you do a Japanese style, Chinese style, it doesn't matter. Business is business, and the systems just flat out work for anyone across the country. And I've proven it time and time again.
Yeah, I've seen. As I say, I've been at your events, and I have seen such a diversity, not only in styles but all over America and Canada. Actually, come down to your events. So I approve those, and everyone should go and check those out.
Yeah, Steve, you were big. By the way, you were a big hit at our event. Everybody's like, "When's he coming back?" I'm like, "I don't know. I can't afford him, man. The guy's too busy."
Well, there you go. We'll talk later. So how did the Hollywood transition occur? Because you've always struck me as a very calm, peaceful, quiet guy, and yet you're jumping around on some of the biggest productions that have ever come out with any kind of martial arts movement in them. How did that happen? And of course, the big one, how did Scorpion happen?
Okay, well, listen, when I was young, Bruce Lee was the guy, right? So I always looked up, besides my dad, I looked up to Bruce Lee, like, he's amazing, amazing martial artist, doing great stuff. But I also thought, hey, it would be cool if I got an opportunity to do that. I'd like to try and do our martial arts in the movies. So in the back of my head, it was something I kind of always wanted to do. And being in LA, you get opportunities. So I got to be on some small movies. Did China O'Brien, Revenge of the Ninja, some little things like that, background here and there. And then I got an opportunity to be in the original Karate Kid because I was competing on the circuit at the time. And when they were filming it, they wanted the movie to have an authenticity to it. So they actually shot the tournament scene at a real martial arts tournament. So I just happened to be there, and they were picking out guys. Hey, do you want it? So in the background scenes of the tournament, if you don't blink, you will see me. So that was kind of my first big taste of a big Hollywood movie from there. And then again, just did some other small things, but because I was competing and I was on the pro tour, I was traveling the country. I was at a tournament in Atlanta. And when I was there, I won the championship. I just won. I was the number one competitor for like 4 years in a row. And I won the championship. But there were some producers that were putting together a TV show called WMAC Masters. And they asked me and a couple other guys who had won that night, do you want to do this TV show about martial arts? And we're like, oh, yeah, sure. So as you know, in Hollywood, someone says that, but you don't hear from them for 6 months. During that time, I got a call from my agent about going to this audition for Mortal Kombat, which at that time, the video game was huge, just everywhere huge. And I said, yeah, man, I would love to do Mortal Kombat. So we get there and they said, there was like 100 of us guys. And they said, all of the roles are cast. We just need background fighters. So if you remember the movies, there are some background fighting scenes and the guys cheering around the ring and things like that. And I go, great, I just want to be in a major motion picture. I'm tired of working in these smaller things, but it'll be a stepping stone for me. So they said, we just want to see you do your stuff. And I got a chance to watch some guys go, and I go, wow, those guys are pretty good. But they had the area that we were performing in set up like a tournament, which means they had 3 people sitting in chairs and they were watching us do their stuff. And as I'm doing my stuff, I realized these guys are only maybe about 4 feet high and sit in the chairs. I can clear them. So I go running at them and I go do a jump kick and I go over the top of them. And I just remember in slow motion watching these guys go like this. Boom. And I did some moves behind him and then I dove back over top and I finished. And then that night I get a phone call and they say, hey, we want you to come back tomorrow. I'm like, okay, cool. So I go back tomorrow. Now the crowd's much smaller, maybe 20, 30 guys. We do some other things. I get a call that night and they go, we want you to come back again. And I'm like, what do I have to do to be in a background for Mortal Kombat? Like, this is insane. But I go back the third time and now there's just 3 of us. There's me and 2 other guys. And they have a big Panavision camera there and a bunch of people around the camera. I have no idea who any of these people are. And they're just filming us. They go, we just want you to stand there. So they're filming us like this. And a guy walks over to me and the other 2 guys, and he goes, would you guys mind taking off your shirt? Now, I'm young, I'm nervous, and I just look at him and I go, listen, if you'll get me in this movie, I'll go back to your trailer. So you laugh, which is the response I was hoping for, but this guy, deadpan. And I thought, whatever this is, like, it's over for me. I'm probably out. So we take off our shirts. Of course, I was on the pro tour, so I'm in great shape. The guy on my left, he wasn't in great shape. The guy on my right was like all furry, whatever. So I'm trying to not flex, but stand there like I'm not flexing, but I'm flexing. They film us for a few more seconds. They go into this football huddle, and the same guy walks over, and he shakes my hand. He goes, welcome to Mortal Kombat. You are going to be Scorpion. Now, until that moment, I had no idea that role was even open, because when we went there for the first audition, they said all the roles are cast. So I don't know if that was true or not. I'm just glad, because if they said, hey, these parts are open, I probably would have been even more nervous. Yeah. And it just worked out. And I got home and I called my mom. I'm like, mom, guess what? I'm going to be Scorpion. She goes, that's great, honey. What's a scorpion? So that's just kind of how it came about.
How did that? Now that was a massive. Well, it's still a massive franchise.
Mm-hmm.
What did that do to your life? What did that do to your gym?
It helped. It helped, not as much as people would think, though, because here's the truth with being in the martial arts business. Parents, when they bring in their kids, are only care about one thing. Can you help my child? They don't care if you did movies or TV shows. Can you help my child? And as long as we can prove that to them, then they sign up. Then after they sign up, they see the stuff on the wall and they're like, oh, you did movies too? I'm like, yeah, just a few here and there. So it helps kind of on the back end rather so much than on the front end, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. But I've noticed, okay, so there's multiple different layers to you. And again, they always think the classic Hollywood, you'll do one movie and all of a sudden you'll have a penthouse next to Brad Pitt. It's all that kind of stuff. Doesn't quite happen like that. Me and you have both been in LA for long enough to know that. You got involved in books and quite openly, I'm trying to think of a polite word. Why? You've got a successful studio. You're now training people. What was the urge for you to become an author? Why actually go down that avenue?
My problem is I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I love new challenges and new arenas, right? So I started martial arts as my first challenge, movies and TV, my next challenge, competing on the pro tour, another challenge that I wanted to do. So I'm always working on goal setting and kind of what's next. The book thing just kind of aligned with me because I was also starting the bullying campaign, the anti-bullying awareness programs that we run. So the book just made sense because it allowed me to get a much bigger reach, right? I would be great. Like my fantasy is I can help 1 million kids. The reality is I don't know that I'm going to get to teach 1 million kids, but I can reach 1 million kids through books. Like we're working on an animated series and a potential weekly TV series now on anti-bullying for kids. Because through media, through social media, like I could start a television station on YouTube tomorrow. I have an ability to reach 1 million people. So the books were just kind of a natural evolution of it. And that's why I'm excited about them. And I'm excited about the new one I have, which is a direct for kids book. It's going to be an animated series that should come out the first week of March.
This is a statistic that I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am because I've got kids. Bullying has changed and it's got scarier. And I remember as a kid, if you were in the school and someone said, look, I'm going to meet you after, right. You were at the back of the bike shed and it was two guys fronting up and he'd have a couple of mates and you'd have a couple of mates and that was it. People don't come alone anymore and they're carrying stuff and they're becoming a lot more desensitized. Has bullying increased and has the level of danger in that bullying increased and why?
Well, here's the thing. I don't think bullying has increased. What I think is we're just more aware of it now because of social media, because of all the avenues of a fight happens, they're picking up their camera, right? They're filming it. So we're seeing it more and more. So what's happening is social media is shining a spotlight on something that's been on the back burner and percolating for a long time. And now it's come to a head. But you're right. They're not necessarily fighting fair anymore. It's not a fisticuffs anymore. It's I'm throwing a rock at you or trying to swing a baseball bat or stomping on your head when you're on the ground. And part of that, you could potentially blame some of the media and the fighting in movies and the violence in video games. But really at the heart of it, it's not that. It's parenting. And I've seen this over half a century being in the martial arts. Parents, unfortunately, more and more today, want to be their kid's friend instead of their kid's parent. Now, when I was growing up, I love my dad, and he was friendly to me, but he wasn't a buddy. And if I messed up, man, he let me know. And I guarantee you could say the same thing. So it's an evolution in parenting that I see that's more of a challenge, which entitles these kids more to think that they're bulletproof on, well, if I do it, my mom's going to stick up for me or this is going to happen here. These are the things I see because I'm on the street. I'm in the schools. I know.
When you're doing your bullying the anti-bullying camps, and I want to talk about those a little bit more about what they look like, how they, for one, how people can get involved in them. But does any of the education go towards the focus to the parents or are you focusing on the kids?
It's both. It's both, really. The majority, listen, I'm teaching a class of 50, 70, 80 kids when I go to these schools and do these workshops. It really is all education. The number one thing that people think that I do when I go is teach them martial arts. And really, there's only one little martial art piece that I teach them at the very end. It's all educational and it's entertaining because it creates awareness. Then one of the main reasons kids get bullied is they show a lack of confidence or a lack of self-esteem, and they seem introverted and into themselves. Rather, like when you walk into a room, you're big, like you're bigger than life. You have this swagger about you when you walk in, but that wasn't something that you were necessarily born with. It's something that evolves over time, and there's so many kids now that are so insulated. And listen, COVID, with 2 years of shutdown, that just made them more introverted, more inside themselves. So it's more and more difficult for kids to feel self-confident and self-assured, which again, why as I go back to martial arts. And here's the truth. I tell us on every show I'm ever on, I don't care if you train with Red Dragon or not. Just train. Do something that's going to make yourself become more self-aware, more self-confident, so that you can walk into situations and look like you're going to take care of yourself.
Yeah, people do look for the easy route. They look for the victim. And if you identify yourself as that, then you've made yourself an easy target. I know it's very very hurtful when you turn around and say, don't act like a victim and you won't be a victim. And it's not as easy as that. But that is one of the steps. Mm-hmm. Do you just do the anti-bullying camps on the West Coast?
No, I travel all over the country. Wherever someone will have me, I will go. Because, like I said earlier, it's part of my mission and passion and purpose to help as many kids as I can. Because I know I can help change their life and change their world.
So, if someone's listening to this and thinking this is the kind of thing we need, and they want to learn more about your boot camps, your education, your business combat events that, as we've already said, that I've been to and spoke at, and these where do they find out about you and find out about the details of these events you put together?
Well, one of the good things is I'm one of the easiest guys to find on social media. So you can find me on any platform that you're on. I'm on it as well. So the challenge, of course, is spelling my name and getting Casamassa right. So it's really easy to reach out to me there. My website, bullyprooflife.com, will give them more information about bullying. And then if you just type my name into the web, Chris Casamassa, you can reach out to me through all my channels there as well.
Now, I'm going to put the links on I'm going to be putting the links on below so people can get hold of you. I'll put on there how to spell Casamassa so they don't make any of those mistakes. It's not that hard. Casa and then Massa, M-A-S-S-A. But what is the next challenge as a serial entrepreneur, as a business owner, as an athlete, as a sportsman? What's the next challenge for you?
A couple of them. One, with our company, right now we have 17 locations here in Southern California. We're on track to have 20 locations by 2025. I want to try and get us to 25 locations on a minimum, and then see what happens from there and stabilize our platform. Like I said, we've been in business now for 58 years, but we've been on a really nice growth spurt lately, and I want to keep that momentum going. So empowering the other owners that are in the room with me to make sure that they're successfully running their business and taking care of their families and making an impact in their community. That's my next challenge, is really serving them. My business combat clients, same thing with them. But with the bullying, like I said, I have the kids book coming out in March, and the goal is to take that book and turn it either into an animated series or a live action series for kids. And whether I do that on YouTube or maybe one of the streaming networks, if you're listening and you have a streaming network, please hit me up. That would be great as well. We've got all the scripting and all the stuff done for it. And it's going to be all based on the book, so it's really going to be easy to do. But that, of course, will have a massive impact on a lot of kids.
I'm great deal of respect for you, pal. I like the way you move. I like the way you act, and I like the way you impact. Chris Casamassa, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Again, Chris Casamassa, you can Google the guy. He's easy to find. Sexy little beast that he is. And hit him up. Tell him you heard about him on this podcast. But more importantly, get involved in the way that he acts and look him up on his books. They're all on Amazon. I'll put the links below. But Chris, thank you very much for being on the show.
Steve, thanks you. And listen, by the way, if you're not in the Sims distillery, you need to start there because the guy knows what he's talking about. Make it happen.
Cheers, pal. All the best. Bye.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, that was another episode of the Art of Making Things Happen podcast with me, your host, Steve Sims. If you like it, you know the scoop. Subscribe, tell your friends, share it around. Let them get benefit from this juice. And of course, If you want to change the room you're in, join Sims Distillery. Jump over to stevedsims.com/Sims Distillery, or you can find a link directly from that website. That's the room where creative disruptors get together to actually help each other become better. If you've got standards or you want higher standards, join the right room. See you next time.